Now turning to thousands of miles away in China, a key meeting is underway with Chinese leaders to plan the future path for that country's economy. It's known as the Third Plenum. This secret closed-door meeting of Communist Party leaders takes place every 5 years. Now, some China watchers are predicting this gathering will result in big economic and social changes.
Well, those leaders probably welcomed a report today showing China's economy is picking up strength. Industrial output at Chinese factories rose more than 10% in October. The gains were far more than expected and adding to recent data showing momentum in China's economy.
Our next guest just returned from China, where he met with Chinese policymakers and business leaders to talk about what reforms to expect from the Third Plenum meeting in Beijing. He's Robert Hormats, former undersecretary at the U.S. State Department, and he's now vice chairman at Kissinger Associates. So, Bob, a lot of talk about this meeting having big breakthroughs, bold reforms. Is that what you're expecting? I mean, what did you hear from the people you talked with in China last week?
Well, I think most Chinese who are engaged in this are not predicting very bold reforms. For instance, 1978, you had Deng Xiaoping's major reforms opening up China and introducing a dramatic series of changes to make the economy more market-oriented. This time, the key words are comprehensive and deep. And I think they need to cover a wide range of things. They need to improve the efficiency of the banking system to make sure that capital goes to more efficient uses rather than largely state enterprises. They need to free up the deposit rate so depositors will get a more market-oriented rate. They need to make some changes in the capital account to allow a greater degree of inflow and outflow of capital. They need to improve opportunities for state and local governments to obtain revenues because now they engage in very unwise practices about selling land and giving it to developers, and they don't have their own sources of revenue, so they have to do this, and this disturbs a lot of people whose land is being confiscated. So there are a wide range of issues that need to be addressed.
But, Bob, what does this mean in terms of economic growth? I mean, one of the things that we heard from a lot of the CEOs of American companies this earnings season is that their profits were impacted by slower growth in their China operations. So there's this hope that there will be more liberalized business practices in China or some efforts to boost economic growth. Are we going to hear any of that coming out of this meeting?
Well, there are a lot of points in what in your question. One, there will be greater liberalization. There'll be a reduction in regulations. It'll be easier to make investments. There'll be less elements in the government approval process for lots of business transactions. So the economy will be more market-oriented. And that should help growth. At the same time, there's a lot of excess capacity, and the government is tightening up credit to help shrink that excess capacity. They're also going to try to reorient capital from less efficient to more efficient utilization purposes, like away from state enterprises and the private sector. But the government has said itself that it's not going to go all out for the kind of growth that it had a few years ago, 9 and 10%. They're going to go for around 7.5% to enable this transition to take place smoothly and enable this pressing down of excess capacity to take place and to deal with environmental issues. The difference for American business will be the kind of things that China will buy. China's less export-oriented than before. The kind of things they buy will be high-end consumer goods, capital equipment to make more high-quality technology products rather than the more traditional capital-intensive products of the past.
So how can U.S. businesses and investors act on this new information? I mean, is this a game changer in terms of doing business with China?
It may not be a game changer. It may not be quite as dramatic as these so-called third plenums of the past, but I think it will put China's growth, if it works, on a steadier stream, a more secure stream of growth of around 7.5% to 8% for the next several years. And investors should look at the compositional changes. That is to say, the kind of things China will buy will move from raw materials and the sort of heavy capital-intensive kinds of equipment to other things that are more technology-oriented and higher quality consumer products will be very important if consumer growth increases.
All right, I know it's a secretive meeting, but we should know in the next day or so any headlines coming out of the meeting, right?
Yes, well, and it may take a little time, but we should hear a press conference at the end of the meeting, and then there'll be a plenum report sometime in the next several days, but perhaps not right away.
All right, we'll see what happens. Thank you so much, Bob. Always a pleasure to get your analysis.
Thank you. Thanks.
Robert Hormats, former undersecretary with the U.S. State Department.